Question is the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and it's a great pleasure to be able to speak on this motion moved by the member for Menzies and also of the contribution of the member for Bennelong and the member for Clark to date, because the experience that I have had as the member for Goldstein, as I'm sure many other members had throughout the past year, is of many constituents who, through no fault of their own, booked travel arrangements, flights, accommodation and operations, tours, etc. overseas or even within Australia, that suddenly found themselves abruptly cut short as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic, and particularly around some of the issues both in insurance, around the pandemic exemptions, but also a lot of them finding it's very difficult to get refunds and or to be able to get even credits in some cases, or usable credits, I should say more correctly, in some cases for bookings that have been made. And I'd like to particularly reiterate the point the member for Clark raised, which is firstly that travel agents often are the meat in the sandwich, for want of a better phrase, between the consumer and often the travel operator, and have been unfairly maligned. I believe that, and I have a lot of travel agents within the Goldstein electorate who do an excellent job every day in helping Australians realise their travel dreams, but they are often only the booking agents, and of course take a fee because that's how they keep their business model running, but often required to be paid money internationally or domestically, but are often the ones responsible for then recouping that money in the time frame. And it's particularly common when money goes overseas and people are making bookings in Australia for services overseas and recouping that money, or in the case of many travel or tour arrangements where credits may be offered, but they may expire within the time frame as we're experiencing right now, say for instance a 12-month time frame, which means that people aren't able to use them because of the continued closure of international borders. So there is something that needs to be done in this space. I have spoken to the chair of the ACCC, Rod Sims, in our Economics Committee hearings and asked him what he thinks needs to be done. And he has actually made the comment he doesn't believe a lot needs to be done. And I think what we're seeing in the parliament is actually that isn't enough, or that isn't acceptable, that there is an expectation that there has to be some sort of rebalancing to protect the rights of consumers and their choices, and also making sure that they're not taken advantage of, or when their money is taken, that there isn't a sense of responsibility that flows through with it. Because many of the travel agents I speak to from constituents who complain about not being able to get their money back often are dependent on the actions of others. And there needs to be some sort of understanding or obligation in contractual arrangements into the future, I think from this experience, where travel agents expect obligations to flow through and to make sure that operators do the right thing by customers so they don't get left in the middle. But I know, as many members will, that throughout the past 12 months, many people have made these bookings and sought consumer protections on the simple basis of expecting either their money to be refunded or, as I said before, some sort of credit, and have found themselves either in Australia or overseas essentially giving up, because the volume of money, while perhaps not being insignificant, actually is placing as much of an emotional burden on themselves to try and recoup it. And even in many cases, people, of course, even got those credits but are not able to use them. So I think it's critically important that we look at consumer protection and there's a proper analysis of what it means in a consequence of an age, potentially of future pandemics, but also around the general operation of consumer protections from disruption. I know this is a big issue for the insurance industry, not just because of general exemptions associated with pandemics, but also because of other issues aligned like business interruption and the need to do so. Now, of course, as the Morrison government has been very aware of the impact this is having on many small businesses, particularly around issues of cash flow, from when they're required to make reimbursements for people seeking to recoup their money, and that's why we've provided support to the travel sector, whether it's directly to the providers or in addition to many of the travel agents. But that's only really to carry them over the bridge, as we used to call it. It doesn't solve the fundamental woes that sit at the heart of it, though they have been stretched by trying to meet their obligations to consumers. And we need proper obligations and responsibilities placed on those who book services to make sure that actions are properly taken. But it does require a review, it does require some form of inquiry to properly address.
The question